1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 24 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in here. We broadcast from the Paddock Mall, in case you didn't know. And we used to have a store in this mall called Radio Shack. It's gone. I know Sears has had its... Sears is still here, but some of the Sears are closing. Macy's is here, and some of those are closing. Kmart, oh my gosh. It's like these giants of the business world are starting to disappear. There was a story this morning that Amazon might be a big threat to a lot of grocery stores who need to think about, maybe more rethink how they've done things all these years. The one thing that's always been fascinating to me is how a product or a company brands itself. And so we have a guest who's going to talk to us about that. Jonathan David Lewis is a partner, a strategy director, and brand survival expert at McKee Woolwork and Company. He's a contributor to some of the big ones, Forbes, Digiday, Advertising Age, and he's honoring us by being on our little show. The book is called Brand versus Wild, Building Resilient Brands for Harsh Business Environments. And if you're Publix, you need to pay attention to this because you're strong, you're big, but oh my gosh, Amazon is making its mark. Good morning, Jonathan. Thank you for being on the air with us today.
Hey, thank you, Larry. Good to be here.
Where are you? Where are you calling from?
I am in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Yeah, did you see that news this morning about Amazon perhaps changing the way we buy groceries?
I did, and it definitely, I'd be scared if I were Kroger.
Yeah, and I don't know, what are they doing differently? Well, the article hinted at data. What do they call it? Data mining? Just getting the information from you and me to indicate what we like and what we probably will buy.
Yeah, it's sort of like when you go to Amazon.com today and look for a book, it's learning. Every time you make any sort of decision or action, it's learning from your behavior, serving up new recommendations, and they're hoping to apply a similar model to the grocery store experience, but then add all the efficiency and convenience that comes along with an online, mega store that they have their entire back end that can support their actions. So, if you look at the kind of the grocery space today, you see a little bit of incremental change. They'll offer some online order and you can pick it up, maybe a little bit of delivery. Nothing fundamentally, the grocery industry hasn't been Ubered yet, but I think we're about to see it get Ubered pretty strong by Amazon, where they're going to kind of put the whole thing together, from delivery to what you purchase, how you purchase it, and the whole package.
So what do you mean by brand versus wild? What is the wild part of this? Is it people like Uber who just out of nowhere decide to have a face-off with the taxi cab folks?
Yeah, I mean, emotionally, the wild is simply what we're all feeling today. Whether you're a business person or you're just trying to make it through life, you check your headlines this morning. I mean, it is crazy out there. Every single day, there's turmoil in politics, there's change in business, in technology, and the pace of change is increasing so fast. So that's kind of the emotional side of the wild. Technically, the wild are 3 of 7 dynamics that we identified through our national research that affect business growth. 3 of the 7 are actually external. There's things like the economy, disruption, competition. These are the things that dislodge or disorient companies and make us feel lost in the wilderness. What's so interesting about the book is that we've been able to highly correlate our own business research, where we identified those 7 factors, with the latest in survival psychology. So much that I can sit here today and say there is very little difference psychologically between a group of people that crash land on a mountain or lost in the desert and a group of business people sitting in a boardroom dealing with some unexpected challenge. Both groups respond in a very predictable way to disruption.
Okay, so let's look at the horse and carriage. Nobody hires the horse and carriage guy anymore, except for a few things, maybe in Central Park. Or, but as far as a main meet, I'm just trying to think of an old example that went away, or anything that is now gone. the brand might have been the best brand in town or in the country, but yet if the world changes at large and we have cars as opposed to horse and buggies, I mean, doesn't that usurp the whole brand idea as far as that goes?
Well, it can, certainly. So I think a couple of more recent examples would be Kodak, who, I mean, they had 140,000 employees. They were a billion-dollar company. They were one of the most valuable companies in the world, but the technology passed their brand by. Same thing with Blockbuster, who had an opportunity to purchase Netflix and passed up that opportunity, and the world passed them by. I think that the key is in the subtitle of the book, right? So it's brand versus wild, but the key is building resilient brands. So how do you build resiliency into your brand versus fixing your brand to a current technology where really it has to mean more, it has to stand for more than whatever current technology you're using today.
And does technology kind of dictate that? Does Uber exist simply because it's more convenient?
Uber exists because there was a gaping hole in the marketplace where the people were screaming for help. If you think about how terrible the experience has been for many years with taxi transportation, Uber came along. And it's so fascinating. They don't make anything. They barely do anything. They don't have all this overhead. They don't try to get their overhead down. They don't have employees. They simply connected the dots between all of these things and made the whole experience, uplifted the whole experience where it's so far more convenient, it's easier, and it's cheaper, and you get better service. So they simply came along and noticed a significant opportunity that really everybody felt. It wasn't a new thing, and they just connected the dots.
But Lyft is doing the same thing, but Uber seems to be the one that's winning here. Why in that comparing those two companies, why does one have a more recognizable brand name than the other?
That's a great question. So once there's a new marketplace that's been set, so at one point both had great growth opportunity, were growing pretty quick, but once there's been some market saturation of some kind, that's when you really get into the likability warfare, and that's how important brands can be. Why do you prefer one brand over the other? I mean, there is some science, but there's very little science. There's a lot of art to it, and that's where which ones. And that if you look at the news today, Uber is struggling. Their brand is hurting. Their CEO just took some time off because they're embattled with internal staffing issues. There've been some bad allegations, and they've actually been suffering. Their brand has been suffering. It'll be interesting to see if their sales suffer because of that as well.
So tell me about some of the things specifically that are in the book. One of the chapters seems to deal with fear. Explain that.
Well, this is what's so interesting. Dr. John Leach, who's a pioneer in survival psychology, tells us that according to his 10-80-10 theory, we all react in one of three ways to an unexpected challenge, and this applies in business. 10% of us are prepared. We act with logic and rationality, and we actually can get through or lead others through a very dangerous situation. 80% of us are paralyzed by that disruption. So we're afraid, and that fear causes us to freeze. And then another 10% of us panic and make things worse. So the question is, where do you fall in the 10-80-10 theory? Most of us are not prepared for any sort of disruption. And so, like Sears, like Blockbuster, when that disruption starts to creep along, when we have the opportunity to buy Netflix, we freeze because we don't have the context, we don't have the perspective we need to make good choices because we're so afraid.
Okay, and how do you recognize it as fear rather than just? I'm sure they didn't think of it as fear. I'm sure they thought of it as, no, that was just a smart move. They probably didn't see it as fear.
Yeah, so in the case of Blockbuster, it's probably less fear and more arrogance. In the case of Kodak, it was certainly fear. They invented their own disruption. They invented digital photography technology, and they did a study where they saw how quickly it was going to be adopted, and they were very afraid because 90% of their profit came from film. So certainly fear is a big part of it, but one thing that's really important to note is success, something I discussed in the book. Success is the beginning of failure, because success often means you become arrogant, you grow, which means you're not nimble anymore, and you believe the myth that whatever made you successful will continue to make you successful, which is just a lie.
And I've heard this many times, that ego gets in the way. People, gosh, you see it all the time in this business, in radio. So ego really plays a role as well. I think. Does the research kind of verify that?
It does. So one of the key differentiators between groups of people that are lost in the wilderness and facing some sort of hellish, horrible environment, those that survive and those that self-destruct, the key difference is the internal health of the team. It's not the supplies, it's not the weather, it's not the external factors. And it's how healthy is your team? How good is your leadership? How well are you dealing with conflict? Do you have focus? Or do you have courage rather than fear? Those are the key differences. And so when you put into that equation a leader or a whole organization that is filled with arrogance, filled with pride, not only are they blind to what's really going on, but they believe their own, they drink their own Kool-Aid, and next thing you know, Netflix is putting you out of business.
I'm in an industry that probably was fearful that TV would knock it out of the water, and yet I think the success of radio stations singularly, not necessarily as a industry, but singularly, it has to do with I trust. I think the listeners have to know that the people they're listening to on the air are not trying to sell snake oil, and just being there. I think it's almost like a very organic, primal thing that they and us on the air are with their friends. We're friends with them, or at least it feels that way.
Yeah, and all those words you're using are very relationship-based words, right? And that's why a lot of business leaders get uncomfortable with these topics, because it's hard to put relationship-based concepts onto a spreadsheet. When, in fact, our research, when we conducted 2 national studies over the last 10 years, we discovered 4 of the 7 statistically significant factors that affect growth are inside of companies. They're about the internal health, the internal dynamics of a company. So if your team is resilient because you have healthy conflict, because you can overcome fear, because you have focus, if your team is healthy and aligned, then really whatever the external challenge, you are equipped to be resilient and navigate that rather than be broken by it. That's why we recommend to focus so much internally, so you can have the perspective and change as needed and not be overcome by this wilderness that's kind of overcome us all.
Fascinating topic for sure. Jonathan David Lewis is our guest. His book is called Brand versus Wild: Building Resilient Brands for Harsh Business Environments. If you're a business person, I kind of want to focus a little bit on the mom and pops, if we could, on the other side of the break. So let me take the break, and we will be right back.
The weather is brought to you by MyFWC.com. Safe boating is no accident. A mix of sun and clouds with a heavy thunderstorm moving from the coast to inland for the afternoon hours. The high 83 to 87, and a shower thunderstorm into the evening tonight, a low 74 to 78. Tomorrow looks rather cloudy. Again, a shower thunderstorm, especially in the afternoon inland, a high of 86 to 89. Shower thunderstorm for Wednesday, high 86 to 90. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Maggie Johnson.
Are you wasting hundreds or thousands of dollars on termite retreat fees? If you're not with Turner Pest Control, you probably are. Turner Pest Control offers the industry's only termite and pest control package that never charges retreat fees, ever. You can get started today for only $99. This is a value of $500 or more. This includes treatments, installation of monitoring stations, quarterly pest control, and a lifetime guarantee, all for an unbelievable low $99. Even if you have another pest control provider, visit turnerpest.com to find out how you can avoid paying those high termite retreat fees.
Hello, gorgeous.
Hi, this is Becky at Hello Gorgeous Salon. Let's get rid of those sun damaged ends and faded out color and get into something rich and vibrant. It's time to get that new look started. So call today and set up your appointment at Hello Gorgeous Salon, 351-5358. Hello Gorgeous is a certified Brazilian blowout salon. We can tame those locks, leaving your hair healthy and shiny with a Brazilian smoothing treatment. And whether you're going on a job interview or out on a date, your hands do a lot of talking. Manicures are a must. Hello Gorgeous is a full-service salon, so let us help you make a great first impression. Call us today to set your appointment at Hello Gorgeous. Our number is 352-351-5358. Again, that's 352-351-5358. Hello Gorgeous is conveniently located in the heart of downtown Ocala, right next to the historic Marion Theater. And don't forget, we also do men and children's cuts too.
Hello, gorgeous.
Hi, this is JP from Penn Flooring here in Ocala. I would like to invite you to come in and visit our spacious showroom where we have solutions for every style and budget. From wall-to-wall carpet to hardwood floors and tiles, we have an unsurpassed selection of flooring. At Penn Flooring, we've provided quality customer service with a family touch for over 25 years. Visit our website at pennflooring.com or come by our showroom, 1201 Southwest 17th Street, just over the bridge. Penn Flooring, quality customer service with a family touch.
All right, 10 minutes before 11 o'clock, it's hard to listen to the commercials and not realize that that's exactly what we're talking about, that branding that happens during the commercials. In our case, it's audio, obviously print and television that would have a visual aspect to that. Jonathan David Lewis is our guest. His book is called Brand versus Wild. I want to touch on some of the things that we haven't touched on yet, but I was just curious. Could you hear the commercials during the break?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, so every one of those advertisers is doing something to maintain their brand in this community. And using words, as you kind of pointed out, that reflect kind of a personal connection to whatever it is they're selling or giving you a service to do. So how do you measure your own effectiveness? How do you know that you're doing the right job when it comes to branding?
Certainly, ultimately, it's sales, right? I mean, are you meeting your revenue goals, and are you increasing margin? And margin profit is a really good guide in terms of value, because if you're commoditized, if you're hyper-focused on efficiency, and this is really an important point in the book, commoditized industries are hyper-focused on efficiency, where value and the new world, the new economy, is focused on flexibility. And there's some real ramifications to that thought process, where if you look back over the last 10, 20, 30 or more years, success was defined by size, scale, longevity. I've been in business for 30 years. I've been in business for 50 years. That means I'm successful, or I have better partnerships. I know the industry better. When in many ways, those things today can actually be vulnerabilities. And that's why so many people are being blindsided. They're still operating under these old principles of success. Right. And that's why efficiency can be a bad thing. So today it is about flexibility and building a business that can modulate and be resilient as things continually change.
And that explains Amazon, that explains Uber. That really does explain a lot of what we were talking about earlier. One of the names that is in my notes is Ernest Shackleton. Who is he, and what's the importance of his message?
Yeah, so throughout the book, every chapter really is rooted in a real-life survival story. And Ernest Shackleton is a famous explorer who went to Antarctica several times. And he's really featured in a book, or in the chapter about focus and kind of finding your focus. But what's so fascinating about him is his mission failed miserably. He was trying to traverse Antarctica from end to end, and his ship got stuck in these giant converging ice fields. And he had a whole crew of 20-odd people that he was responsible for. But what was so amazing about his story is, over the course of these months of this, heroic striving to succeed and to get back to safety, he didn't lose a single person. And he went on this epic voyage in a small lifeboat with 4 other people while he left his crew on the shore across the most dangerous waters in the world with almost no equipment. And he actually survived this 800-mile journey and then trekked another several miles in this thigh-high snow to save his crew. And what was so amazing about Ernest Shackleton is, again, every external factor you can consider, whether it was supplies or weather or succeeding in his mission, he failed. I mean, everything was against him. He didn't lose a single person because he was so focused on his team, and he had such good team morale. He was an amazing leader. And one thing that he taught us was that he would use any excuse to celebrate in the midst of this harsh circumstance. It didn't matter what was going on. He was going to celebrate it and bring everybody together, because morale is so important when you're embattled in those tough situations.
That is interesting, isn't it? Somebody one time said about Amtrak that they should have not have thought of themselves as being in the train business, but instead in the transportation business, and then maybe they wouldn't have gotten into the red zone as they got, and now of course they're being threatened by the budget cuts because they're subsidized by tax money. Is that how we all should think? Like, in other words, we're not in the radio business; we're in the communication business. A newspaper, same thing. They're not, because newspapers are really getting hit more than radio right now.
Mm-hmm.
So newspapers aren't really in the print business; they're in the communication business, same as us.
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing is resilience. If you describe yourself as, a horse and buggy business, go back to your example, then you're gone. You don't exist today.
Right.
But if you're in the transportation business, then you can modulate, you can change. And a really good example of this is a book called The Connected Company that was written by Dave Gray uses a great example. He says most companies today view themselves like trains on a train track, to go back to Amtrak.
Yeah.
Right? So when they're trains on a train track, if they come across some sort of mudslide or other obstacle, what do? They convene a committee, they go into a boardroom, and they say, all right, are we going to build some train tracks over this obstacle, or are we going to go around? Maybe we should tunnel under. When really, fundamentally, they're asking the wrong question. They don't need to build, more efficient, better train tracks. They need to get the company off the train tracks. So we're not talking about, kind of incrementally improving marketing or incrementally improving your business model here. We're talking about, depending on which business you're in, you need to redefine fundamentally how you understand your business if you want to stay relevant for the future.
Oh man, I love what you're saying, and it does take a little bit of willingness to change for somebody who's got a stubborn idea of what they should be doing. But survival is the key here, and I guess if we're not resilient and we're not flexible, that word flexible really struck a chord with us. I think that's the part of the keys right there. Before we wrap it up, let's make sure the listeners can get the book. It's called Brand versus Wild. Jonathan David Lewis is the author. Give us some websites. Is it on Amazon?
Yeah, certainly. You can buy it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere books are sold. You can find out more about me, more about my company, and find my social platforms on jonathandavidlewis.com.
Okay, that's easy enough. Jonathan, thank you for being on the air with us today. Good stuff.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, you're welcome. We will be right back.
Here is your 30-second news brief. The man accused of shooting a nurse in the leg at West Marion Community Hospital has been identified as 38-year-old Jason Ronald Gignac of Summerfield. A sinkhole opened yesterday at the east entrance to the Paddock Mall on Southwest 27th Street.